evening and welcome to the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. And the top story that we are looking at today, the big story really, is a question that is now beginning to be asked in earnest. Is it time to move all companies to a 15% corporate tax rate? Remember, late last year, the finance minister had reduced corporate taxes, and for new investments, these are now at 15%. In fact, under active consideration is a proposal to extend the deadline for this 15% tax rate for new investments further ahead, considering that we're now in the middle of a global pandemic. Now, an argument has been made today in the Economic Times that the 15% tax rate should in fact be available for all companies at this time, especially when we're dealing with the fallout of the global pandemic. We're going to grow at a negative rate this year, and India is trying to compete and find a way to move ahead in the middle of this crisis. We want to attract investments from all across the world. So is there a case for a lower tax rate? To speak on this today, I am joined by Sangita Reddy, who is of course the Joint MD of Apollo Hospitals and President of FICCI. Mr. Sandip Somany joins me on the show today, Joint MD of HSIL and immediate past President of FICCI. Rohinton Sidhwa, partner of Deloitte India, is on the show, and I'm also speaking with Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist at CARE Ratings. Welcome to all of you and great to have you on the show today. Ms. Reddy, let me begin by asking you the question, because when we had the corporate tax rate and it was, two sort of compartments, those companies that were choosing to give up incentives and those who would move to a lower rate, effectively we had rates of about 25% and 28% with or without incentives, but not many companies opted for the non-incentive category. Do you think there is a case now for extending the 15% tax rate to all?
So Tamanna, let's do a little bit of a rewind on the overall scenario. I think the fact is that manufacturing contributes about 16 to 17% of GDP. It's important to encourage manufacturing. The growth rate is clearly down. It used to be around 30-31. It was moving towards 29, and post-COVID it's going to be much lower. So whatever tools are in our armamentarium to enhance growth, to enhance investment, is important for us to consider, or for the government to consider. Clearly bringing all companies down to 15%, I think there was an estimate that the tax loss by doing something like that would be in the range of 2.5 lakh crores. So I don't believe that's a move that could happen right now. I think that it's very important to encourage fresh investment. That is clearly the case. The point you made earlier in terms of enhancing India's competitiveness versus other companies to attract fresh investment versus other countries and neighbors. I mean, honestly, China's tax rate is at 25%. Indonesia is 25%. India is at 25.17%. So if you add all the exemptions available, barring whichever is the scenario. But what we need to address is the overall competitiveness factor and look at the other competitive disadvantages that India has, whether it's high cost of capital, poor infrastructure, high logistics cost, cumbersome legal system, rigid labor laws. Some of these are already being addressed. So I think the question is, how do we ensure manufacturing grows? How do we ensure GDP grows? And keeping in mind that for every one manufacturing job, you do bring in 2 to 3 jobs in the service sector. So I think the important point which was made at FICCI's recent NECM, where the Honorable Finance Minister was there, is that we requested for an extension of the important clause which was announced, that new manufacturing which comes on stream by the year 23 will have a 15% tax cut. So I think extending that to 24 to a time period so that there's time for people to take advantage of this and gives a certainty of the future. I would actually like to request Sandip Somany. He was in fact the past president who made this request. So I think he can talk more about the impact, the overall scenario. But for now, what I'd like to say is that it's important for us to take all measures to enhance manufacturing, to grow GDP, and for employment generation. And towards this, look at the holistic picture. Reducing overall corporate tax rate, if it could be done, would be great.
Yes.
But let me leave it at that to say let's overall look at boosting the economy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I understand and appreciate the caution, Ms. Reddy. This is an environment where, it's a bold, discussion to have as well, and it's a bold question to ask. Because everyone needs a tax cut right now, not just corporate India, but let's layer it out and look at why this demand is being made. And of course, I'll come to you, Mr. Somany, in just a bit. I want to go first to Rohinton Sidhwa to understand what the impact was of the first round of corporate tax cuts. Remember, Mr. Sidhwa, these were hailed as a monumental reform, something that industry has asked for a long time. But did we really see any massive on-ground impact? Admittedly, there wasn't much time because then we got hit with COVID-19 and everything has pretty much changed. But give us some perspective on why and how this would actually help if it were to be considered.
So I think the impact of the rate cuts is, as per the department's own figures, has already been factored into last year's collections. So incidentally, last year we were marginally lower in terms of direct tax calculations than the previous year. And on the 7th of June, actually, the CBDT released kind of a comparison, kind of a waterfall study of the impact of the rate cut, both for corporates. They also did a rate cut in the budget for individuals, which is much smaller, about 23,000 crores. But what they had budgeted for the rate cuts, both the 22 and the 15%, was actually factored at 145 crores. So that they've already factored in, and based on that, we've already seen a decline of tax revenues to that extent. What we are looking at going forward is whether the government will stick to that agenda. And remember, it's a brave government in a time of crisis to continue to stick to an agenda that we are going to keep these rate cuts and we will preserve them. So actually that statement came out loud and clear from the document which was released by the CBDT, which essentially said that the benefits of this rate cut, the higher tax base, the bigger amount of investment coming in, will be seen in subsequent years. So it seems like a foregone conclusion that we will see this 15% rate play out. Now, the question, however, is, in tax, there's this concept of equity amongst taxpayers. And if you give a rate cut to a person who's just started investing, where as opposed to a person who invested the previous year, that equity is not preserved. So the way I see it is that logic tells me that this rate cut, the 15%, will somehow find its way to all taxpayers. When that happens, how it happens is obviously something open for debate still.
So Rohinton, all taxpayers will really be happy with that. I hope what you say comes true.
Sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, this is a space for ideas and to look at how those ideas can move ahead. And let's look at what the basic underlining goal over here is. Mr. Somany, the underlining goal is not to, buffer up more corporate profits, etc. I mean, there are very few and very little corporate profit right now. It's about sustainability of business and it's about actual competition. Ms. Reddy earlier in the show listed out tax rates in the neighborhood, but we have other disadvantages which have to sort of be made up, right? We have land acquisition problems, we have labor law issues, we have red tape to deal with. Can these be counterbalanced by a super attractive tax rate for companies? And would that help preserve companies, help them survive, and maybe preserve employment as well?
So let's look at the facts as of now. Before the Honorable Finance Minister made this announcement, all of corporate India paid 34.95%, which is quite stiff, including all the cesses and the surcharges. Now, originally the government came out and said that this will be reduced to 25.62% if somebody does not take any advantages of the various clauses available and does not take any further benefits, just goes on a flat rate. And if you see the companies which are capital intensive or have implemented have spent a lot of money over the last few years with capacity expansion, they have retained themselves with the old rate because they are getting advantage of MAT. The less asset owning companies or asset light companies have switched to the newer rate. The good thing the government of India did this time, and I must compliment them, is that instead of the government deciding, they left the onus of moving to the corporates. I think that's an excellent thing they've done. So corporates can time when they want to come into the new regime. Then the Honorable Finance Minister made this most welcome announcement of this 17.47% tax for new entrants. I think this is a game changer in terms of attracting new investments. Our competitors in terms of the countries around us are all around in this figure. And I think with what Sangita said, with other factors remaining more challenging in the country, in particularly land acquisition, I think a lower tax rate definitely is going to separate us from our competition and encourage investment in India, not only of Indian entrepreneurs, but also in these post-COVID times when the world gets back to some normalcy, of attracting people who wish to expand outside of China or relocate partly from China. I think that's a very common discussion nowadays, but I think we need to make sure that we really give these investors to put up industrial units in India, real proper red carpet treatment, single window clearance in the true sense of the word, and easy availability of land from all the state governments. I think some of the state governments are quite savvy. They have industrial land and they have a reasonably quick process to give, at least for most industrial users, they'll be able to give land relatively quickly. Some states are quite savvy, but I cannot say that for the whole of India. So I think land is becoming a major constraint as industrial development proceeds ahead. Someday we have to see light at the end of the tunnel after COVID, when the world will come back to some sense of normalcy. The reason why we requested the Honorable Finance Minister to extend this date by a year is that virtually a year will be lost because of all this COVID. The cases are going up in the country still, and many states have a serious issue of if you do travel to that state, land you cannot buy on paper, as you would appreciate, Tamanna, you have to go and physically inspect land to see its suitability. And you can't travel within the country today. The moment you travel, most of the states will put you in a 14-day quarantine. So effectively, for the last 3 months, there has been no travel. And I don't think for any 2-3 months, there'll be travel. So I think it's important to give consistency to corporates. It's very important to corporates to have predictability of policy. And let's hope in our lifetimes, we don't see another 2020. This year, as we were discussing earlier before you came on, is a write-off. So frankly, if corporates know that this is being extended by a year, those corporates who had already started planning and wanting to execute these projects will not worry that these projects will not get completed on time. Therefore, for the life of the project, they may not get this benefit, which I think is counterproductive. I think the government knows, and the government brought this policy out because they want to encourage investment. And I think, this is much ahead of time, we are saying, so that there is no unpredictability in the policy framework. That's the reason behind this thought process.
Okay, but the thing is, everyone wants lower taxes, and the reason why this could be considered at this point is also because our stated plan, our stated mission out of COVID is not just to scrape through, it's to use it as an opportunity, right? We have to become Atmanirbhar. We have to attract investment. We have to use this as a pivotal moment. It's not just about somehow making it to 2021. So in that context, we're going to have to do more than just survive. Madan Sabnavis, where do you stand on this sort of debate? Is there a case for lower taxes? What is the counter to that? Do we have the space for that kind of maneuver? And of course, the question will then arise, why should other classes of taxpayers pay more?
See, in my opinion, I think we need to distinguish between the immediate term and the medium term. In the immediate term, lowering the taxes is not really going to bring any benefit to anyone, because today we're actually looking at a situation where corporate profitability is in a negative area. So there's not going to be any tax collection anyway. But in terms of the medium term, I think it definitely is a case of saying that we need to lower the tax rate for all the companies. Whether it's 25, whether it's going to be 20 or 15 is a matter of debate. I think that's what the government will have to work out. And maintaining equity across all the companies, I think there is a strong case for that, because I think there was an argument made earlier saying that new companies deserve it more than the existing ones. But we should remember that the big investors are actually the existing companies, the larger companies. So I think there's a very strong case for having a harmonious rate for all of them. A lower rate is definitely something which is advisable, which will work in the medium term. However, this said, I would not like to give the explanations which have been provided, saying that merely because we have other disadvantages, we need to lower the tax rate. I don't think that's the right kind of an argument, because I think every country has their own space. They have their advantages and disadvantages. And I, as an entrepreneur who's going in, know very well what are the pros and cons of doing investment in India. So if I have land problem, there are issues in India. It's not very easy for us to solve them, but they have been solved by this point of time. Similarly, when you talk of red tape, the entire administrative system, this is something which comes down, which varies across different countries. So I wouldn't use this as an argument for a lower tax rate, but a lower tax rate in terms of providing an incentive for investment is definitely something which is welcome. However, if you look at lowering of tax rates, what have we seen in the past? Now, going back right to the 80s, when we had this supply side economics tenets which came in saying lower the tax rates and investment increases, what we have seen is that any concessions given on terms of taxation leads to higher investment, maybe with a lag of say 1 or 2 years, and then you're back to normal. So there's again a stagnation. Everything depends upon the demand conditions. If the demand conditions are not evolved, you do not see the commensurate investment coming in, because finally we invest only to make money. So I'm not going to put up a plant of machinery unless I'm able to produce goods or the service and I'm able to provide it. So I think everything has to fit together. So therefore, it has to be done in a calibrated manner. And from the point of view of the government, I think we should realize that practically speaking, I'm talking totally practically speaking, any kind of tax cuts being given is going to result in lower tax revenue. Today, the country is already suffering from the point of view of I'm not able to do any fiscal stimulus. If you look at the entire economic package offered, it's more on the supply side, more through the financial system. We just cannot spend more money because we know our revenue is coming down. So I think to expect it to happen anytime soon, to my mind, would be a bit too optimistic. I don't think the government will go in until they're very sure that they're able to increase the revenue, because there's going to be a revenue loss.
Clearly, this is like I said. No, like I said, it's not like this. We're expecting this to happen tomorrow. The question is that will this help? And all of you all have given your views on this. Then let me come now to Ms. Reddy on what happened when tax rates were actually cut. Did private investment come back? And will private investment actually improve unless we know that demand is returning?
So Tamanna, I think demand returning is clearly something that everybody is worried about in the short term. In the next 6 months, unless there is further stimulus, demand is going to be suppressed. This is well known. We've all asked for it. We've discussed it. I think we've debated it ad nauseum. Will demand return in a 12 to 24-month horizon? Of course it will. That is the nature of the Indian, vibrant democracy and demographic. So if you're talking about investment in manufacturing today, competitiveness versus that, and the structure. Actually, I quoted the other countries' figures to say the gap is not that much, except Vietnam and Thailand, where the tax rate is 20%, and at 15% for new investment, we're very competitive. I actually quoted it to say that with 15% for new investment, it makes India a very attractive destination. We should look for it. And the main point which FICCI was making is that please extend the effectiveness date from 2023 to 2024, and to which I think just sharing or quoting what the Honorable Finance Minister said, she said, I do want people to take advantage of it. We will consider it very favorably. So I think that's something which is on the cards. Let's work towards that, move towards that. because it's important for the GDP of the country to enhance manufacturing.
Yeah, we also have to, be realistic about how various governments, center and state, are feeling about tax revenues right now, and we perhaps see a glimpse of that in the GST meeting, which is to take place later this week. But so far, a consensus on this group seems to be 15% would be great. Unlikely really to happen right now. We'll have to wait and see if the government sees merit in it. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the first discussion.
Thank you, Tamanna. We look forward to more creative ideas to help boost the economy. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Always great to have you on the show, and great to have all of you on the show.